coming up next on the Cultural Connections podcast. Giving Back to the Global Community, Part 3. We'll be joined by Jamie Doyle, Director of Communications for Rosies Place in Boston, Massachusetts. This episode is being recorded live on Wednesday, December 22nd, 2021. This is the Cultural Connections podcast.
And hello, everybody. My name is Brian Ives, and I am the producer and the host of the Cultural Connections podcast. Before I introduce our guest today, I want to remind all of our viewers that we are recording this episode live on Wednesday, December 22nd, 2021. This episode is being live streamed on Facebook today. If you have questions if you have questions for our guests that you would like answered at all during the half hour that we are here live, feel free to comment below and we'll do our best to make sure we get your questions answered. Today, we are going to be continuing our discussion on our part 3 of our series of giving back to the global community. All month long and on the Cultural Connections podcast for the month of December, we are going to be focusing on a different organization that is giving back to the global community. And today's organization is Rosies Place that we'll be spotlighting. Joining me via Zoom on the podcast today is Jamie Doyle. Jamie is the Director of Communications for Rosies Place. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Great. Thank you again. So my first question to you as we begin, and I have this with every single episode of the podcast, I have my guests tell our viewers a little bit about themselves and a little bit about your background, and then we'll get to the organization as a whole.
Sure. Well, so I've been at Rosie's Place for 12 years now. For almost 11 of them, I was Director of Foundation and Corporate Relations, writing grant reports and proposals and all sorts of materials, mostly for our donor community. And for the past year or so, I've been the Director of Communications. So it's really another opportunity to continue telling the stories of Rosie's Place in our community, everybody from our guests to our volunteers and our staff, really just to a wider audience. So time has flown, and I can't believe I'm saying it's been 12 years, but it has, and it's been a great 12 years, and here I am.
Time flies, doesn't it?
It really does.
My next question to you is for our viewers and our listeners that don't really know, can you explain what Rosie's Place is?
Sure, absolutely. Rosie's Place, we really consider ourselves a community center. We have wraparound services. We have, I think a lot of people think of us as a shelter, and we certainly are. We have a 20-bed overnight shelter. But we also have wraparound services, everything from advocacy, which helps women with everything from a Charlie ticket to help finding and securing housing and long-term assistance with more sort of complex needs. We have legal services, we have mental health supports, we have recovery support. We have a public policy program. We have a food pantry that's remarkably grown during the pandemic. We have a dining room that serves 3 meals a day, 365 days a year. So we have really wraparound services. We have a wellness center. We have a women's education center that offers free ESOL and literacy and technology classes. So we really think we really just were built on the concept of rather than sending a woman across town with a referral or an appointment, we really try to bring as much of our assistance on site as we can. And now, in the past 2 years, that also means going remote. So not everything is either on site or sort of accessible through Rosie's Place. But so we're kind of a community center for poor and homeless women here in Boston.
Great. And we're going to get more into the impacts of the pandemic in just a few minutes. But before we get there, let's talk about what is the overall mission then for Rosie's Place?
Sure. Rosie's Place is here to serve, to provide a sanctuary for poor and homeless women, to treat them in the most compassionate and dignified manner we can.
Great. Now, you've been obviously involved with the organization, as you said, for at least 12 years. Over those 12 years, how have you seen the organization grown, and how has Rosie's Place grown over the last 12 years?
Sure, sure. Well, I should say too, maybe just to go back a bit, that Rosies Place is the first emergency shelter for women in the nation. So that really sets us apart in that we were founded by Kip Tiernan in 1974 when she saw women dressing up as men to receive services. And the thought was, why are women doing this? She was asking all the providers, why would they be doing this? And of course, number one is that it's quite vulnerable and dangerous to be a woman on the streets. But number two, really, all these providers were saying, well, there are no homeless women. That's not a challenge. That's not a problem. And she said, well, of course there are, and we can do better. So she opened Rosies Place with the thought that the premise that we would welcome every woman as our guests unconditionally, and we would also accept no government funding, which to this date we have not. We accept no federal, state, or local government funding. So that really sets us apart. So those premises, that creed of ours really has never changed over the past decades. In the past 12 years, I've seen that, of course, has always remained one of our really kind of our compass. But yeah, in recent years, of course, most of all, it's really been the pandemic. But before that, it's just a lot of growth. We've really grown our programs, just always constantly evolving to meet the needs of our guests, which are changing. Whether it's, when I came on, it was really, the economy, it was really down, and we were seeing more women in our emergency services at the time than ever before. So we added hours to our pantry and extended services across the boards. And then, of course, most recently, which I know we'll touch upon, is the pandemic, which is really just unprecedented. And similarly, we just pivoted and grew a lot of programs in response to the need that was so dire.
Absolutely, definitely. And before we continue, I just want to quickly remind all of our viewers that are just tuning in / listening onto this podcast that you are listening or watching the Cultural Connections podcast. We're recording this episode live on Wednesday, December 22nd, 2021. And we're continuing our series on giving back to the global community. And today's organization that we are spotlighting is Rosies Place. And we are joined by Jamie Doyle, Director of Communications for Rosies Place. And if you have a question you would like answered today at all during the podcast, please feel free to comment below here on Facebook, and we'll do our best to make sure you get your answers to your question. My next question is getting now into the pandemic, as you have mentioned a couple of times. How has this global COVID-19 pandemic impacted the work that Rosies Place does?
Sure. Yeah, it's so hard to believe that here we are in another December in the pandemic. But yeah, throughout this horrible pandemic, Rosies Place we've never closed our doors, never missed a day, never missed a beat. We've really just evolved. We've just seen women coming to us, use more women than ever before. And really just with for our unhoused guests, it's really been the most basic and, now most critical needs, whether it's a place to wash your hands, a place to be safe for the day, a place where you can safely social distance. And of course, we provide, meals and snacks throughout the day. So for homeless women, it was really showers, all the things that we provided throughout the years just became more critical and more in demand. For our housed guests, we have been working to provide all sorts of supports around eviction prevention and, when there was such great housing loss at the beginning of the job loss at the beginning of the pandemic. So we really looked at the model of we assessed all of our programs. It was really, we kind of took it as sort of a crisis opportunity to see how we could be of better service to our guests. So that means in our dining room, we have 2 seatings for each meal, so we can accommodate social distancing and not have folks lining up too closely. In our pantry, our food pantry, we have literally tripled its capacity since pre-pandemic levels. So we're now serving 350 households every day. And we have moved that pantry to the window of our Women's Education Center so that folks because that's a large number of women who to be either waiting or waiting in line, are now able to safely social distance outside. And of course, in the groceries we're providing every day, we're also providing household essentials. Since the very beginning, we've had so many great donations of masks, cleaning products, hand sanitizer. And so, of course, those are the things that our guests need just as much as we do, if not more, because they're not able to afford them or even, attain them. So that's been an important part of our response through our pantry, and also our eviction prevention and housing stabilization supports, which are helping women who their stability is rather fragile, or they're living paycheck to paycheck, or they've just got housing. And it's, one sick day could set them back. Through our legal program, our advocacy, and our housing stabilization programs, we really, we've increased those appointments and those services by 70% since over the course of the pandemic. So that's really where we're seeing a lot of our growth. Of course, our ESOL and our technology classes through our Women's Education Center, those are now hybrid. For a long time now, they've been remote, and we've just opened them up to being hybrid. So having some on site, but we kind of realized, like a lot of folks, I think across sectors have, that some things we'll never go back to now. I think some things we're really, now that we have this in place, we have a remote call center for our advocates, so folks can call in rather than take a bus over here, or, leave work or all sorts of stuff. They can call us when they have the time and from when they need the help from wherever they are, and that has seen tremendous growth. So we have an advocacy and a legal help hotline, and so we really, like so many things, we will certainly be keeping those because we can see they're really impacting our guests positively.
Absolutely. No, it's incredible. My next question to you is you basically sort of touched the surface on this, is about the programs and services that Rosies Place offers to women. Can you explain what some of those programs and services are that are offered?
Sure thing. So we've certainly got our sort of emergency services. The most basic, we're talking about when an unhoused woman comes in through our doors. She can sign up for a shower. She can sign up to use a computer or a telephone, sort of just basic lifelines that women who don't have an address, don't have a home, don't have. We are also a mailing address for hundreds of women. So they might need, just sort of those basic kind of things. And of course, food, wellness check. We have a wellness center where we partner with several local agencies. So that's staffed through the week. So a woman will come in and can access all those things. We also have, like I mentioned, the food pantry for housed women, if you have housing. We also have our women's education program, which again, that has about 300 students each semester learning predominantly English as a second language. We also have technology classes and tutoring one-on-one, so that if a woman needs help, studying for her driver's license or her citizenship test, we have a tutor who will work with her on that. We have a public policy program that helps to really advocate on the issues that really affect poor and homeless women, and also to engage our guests in public policy processes, everything from voting to testifying at the State House. So what else? We have, of course, we have our overnight shelter, and what really sets that apart is that in our overnight shelter, women can stay for 3 weeks at a time rather than just one night. So, so many shelters in the city, women are waiting in line to see if they can get a bed for the night, and then they're leaving first thing in the morning the next day, and then worrying about getting in line that day and how that's going to happen. So it's very hard to get any respite or any progress made when you're really just living just to get in line for the bed. So while 3 weeks is not a solution, it is definitely offers our guests some time to connect with our other services here. So that's really important. And I mentioned we have some outreach and stabilization programs that help women who are housed remain housed. They could have mental illness, struggle with substance abuse disorder, just even have just language barriers, all sorts of challenges that could jeopardize their housing. So we have roughly 80 women who we support through that program, and that's really, we're seeing that grow as well. We have a legal support program that helps women with everything from quarry checks and sealing quarries to family and immigration law. Really have a spectrum of services.
That's incredible. It's incredible to see, hear everything that's offered, and wonderful also. My next question to you, actually, before I get into my next question, let me just quickly again remind all of our viewers one more time here that if you are just tuning in or listening to us, you are watching or listening to the Cultural Connections podcast. We are talking today about giving back to the global community, part 3, and our organization that we're spotlighting today is Rosies Place, and we're joined by Jamie Doyle, Director of Communications for Rosies Place. And if you have a question you would like answered, please feel free to comment below here on Facebook, where we are live streaming to today. My next question to you is talking about challenges. Now, besides the COVID-19 pandemic, what are some of the other challenges that the organization has faced in recent years?
In recent years, I think it's really, excuse me, just always being able to have the flexibility to tailor our help to our guests' changing needs. We are really fortunate in that because we do not accept federal, state, or local government money, we're able to be a little bit more flexible in how we provide our help. So that really allows us to tailor our services as to how we're not tied to an administration or government grants that are not always a guarantee. So we are able to really evolve with our guest needs. So I think, just this past, this fall, we completed our renovations that we had put on hold, unfortunately, due to the pandemic. But we renovated a really large portion of our main facility on Harrison Avenue. So we brightened our lobby and our dining room. We expanded our meeting spaces and our sitting room to accommodate more women that we're seeing in the past, of course, 2+ years. And we added, meeting space for our growing staff, as well as privatized laundry and phone and computer spaces for our guests. So projects like that are helping us to keep pace with our guests' needs.
Well, that's great. That is absolutely great to hear. My next question to you is talking about the most rewarding thing, at least in your perspective. What do you believe is the most rewarding part of when you see people coming in and out of Rosies Place? What is the most rewarding thing you get?
Good question. I think for me, the most rewarding part of working at Rosies Place is who I work with and how we work and who we serve. It's really, I'm part of a great community, and our guests are women of just resolve and resilience, and they're really always inspiring with how, they just get things done, and they have, whatever the challenge may be, together with them, we really work to figure things out. But I think being part of a community that welcomes women so unconditionally and is able to provide help. There's no expiration date for our help, which is also unusual for many organizations. So there's no eligibility requirements and there's no expiration date. So it's really lovely to be part of a community that's so welcoming and so unconditional with our compassion.
Well, that's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful to hear. My next question to you is that with the Christmas holiday just a few days away, as we're recording this episode live on December 22nd, so a couple of days before Christmas holiday, what are some of the is there anything special that the organization, that Rosies Place, does during the holiday season for women, specifically for the holiday?
Sure. So many things. I just spent a good portion of today getting some more gifts for our holiday shop. We provide this season, we're providing 1,000 holidays gift bags to our guests with gift certificates and winter essentials like gloves, hats, mittens. and also some toiletries and hygiene kits, blankets, just a nice holiday gift that our guests look forward to every year. So we were able to provide 1,000 this year. This is the largest number we've been able to do. And so that's part one, and that's been great success as always, thanks to a lot of our volunteers and donors who have really contributed so generously. We also will have a 2-day really celebration of Christmas in our dining room with DJ and music, and we've already decked the halls and trimmed the tree, and our dining room has got a lovely menu from couple brunches for 2 days straight, and we're planning New Year's as well, but we'll celebrate with food and music and good friends, so it'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. That's absolutely wonderful. My next question to you is thinking about now the future, moving ahead. Where do you see Rosie's Place 10 to 15 years from now?
Wow, 10 to 15 years.
You don't have to go that long, whatever you look at the future.
Sure. No, it's a good question. I think, when I think of the future of Rosie's Place, I often think of our founder, Kip Tiernan, who was really, quite a visionary. She helped found Greater Boston Food Bank and Healthcare for the Homeless and a great many organizations in Greater Boston. She often said, success for us will be when we have to close our doors, when our help isn't needed anymore, and there's no women who need our services. So I think until that happens, we're really, working to not just only address the symptoms of poverty and homelessness, but really, through our public policy and our social justice work, also work to address the root causes. So I think, however that may look, I think the pandemic, as we well know, unfortunately, we're not through it. And I think that, like so many things of this nature, that we will be dealing with the ramifications and the ripple effect of it for certainly the next few years down the line. Yeah. And so we're really, just as usual, just watchful of what our guests are needing, and how that looks, whether it's something as immediate as masks and hand sanitizer, or more eviction prevention funds, more housing supports, more career support. So I think Rosie's Place will keep growing and working to address the needs as long as there are needs.
That's great. And my next question to you is, before we start to get to reach the end of today's podcast, and again,
Sure.
just a quick reminder of our viewers that if you're just tuning in, again, watching or listening, this is the Cultural Connections podcast, and we are live on Wednesday, December 22nd, 2021, talking about Rosie's Place with the Director of Communications, Jamie Doyle, part 3 of our series of giving back to the global community. But as we start to reach the end of our podcast today, people are interested in making a charitable donation to Rosie's Place. How can they go about doing that?
Wonderful. If they are, that'd be lovely. And thank you in advance. You can certainly visit our website at rosiesplace.org and just click donate or give right on the homepage. But there's also, you'll find a host of other ways to support us. Everything from hosting a virtual fundraiser to a virtual food drive. Here again, since the pandemic, we've really embraced technology, as so many folks have, and also, we're able to receive sort of exactly what we need for our pantry or for our guests through Amazon, through Peapod. So many things like that that don't require guests, volunteers or donors coming in, and it's been great. So there's all sorts of ways to help like that, by helping us stock our food pantry, help with care packages for our guests. All that is at rosiesplace.org.
Well, that is fantastic. And it's hard to believe that we've already reached a half an hour towards the end of our podcast today. But I want to thank again, Jamie Doyle, for joining us today. If you want more information again on Rosie's Place, you can visit the website, www.rosiesplace.org. That's correct?
You got it.
Correct. That information will be right here on the bottom of your screen. If you're not able to get that, if you're watching, if you're listening, I will also have it in the description of the podcast link for you as well. So look for that. Again, if you have questions or comments about today's episode of the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me directly at brianives@gmail.com. We're also still taking suggestions for our special series of giving back to the global community. If you have an organization you think we should spotlight right here on the Cultural Connections, you can email me at brianives@gmail.com, BRIANIV as in Victor, ES @gmail.com, and that email address will be right here on the bottom of your screen as well. So again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. And again, thank you to Jamie for joining me. And we will see you next time on the Cultural Connections podcast. My name is Brian Ives, and I am the producer and host of the Cultural Connections podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you again for watching this episode of the Cultural Connections podcast. For more information on today's episode, be sure to check out our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also watch this episode again in its entirety on our YouTube channel. This podcast is also available on listening platforms Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Breaker, Radio Public, and New TV. Thanks again for watching this episode of the Cultural Connections podcast.